They came on a Wednesday morning in March. My mother and my sister, together, which told me something. They had papers. They said the house was not mine. They said it had never been mine. They said my grandmother had sold it to them years before she passed, and they had the documents to prove it. I let them finish. I made them both a cup of coffee. Then I called my attorney. This is that story. My grandfather built that house on purpose. He had chosen the lot, drawn up the plans, and saved for 7 years before he and my grandmother moved in. He told me that story more times than I can count. I never tired of hearing it. By the time I knew that house, it had been a home for 30 years, and it showed in the best way. Every room had something in it that meant something. My grandmother was the kind of woman who kept everything on purpose. Photographs on every wall, a drawer in the kitchen full of birthday cards she had received over 40 years, kept every one of them. A garden she had tended so long it had stopped being a garden and started being a record. She taught me to bake in that kitchen, properly, with the windows open and the radio on a station she had listened to since before I was born. She said, "You measure once and trust yourself the second time." I have cooked that way ever since. She made me a quilt the year I turned 16. We chose the fabric together. She had a basket of scraps she had been saving for years, and we sat on the back porch on a Saturday afternoon and sorted through them. I picked the ones I wanted. She said she would handle the rest. The finished quilt lived on the spare bed, the room that was mine when I stayed. She made my jacket the same year. Blue, my favorite color then and still. She asked me twice to be certain about the shade before she started cutting. When I put it on, she looked at me for a long moment and said, "Yes, just that. Yes." I had a key to the house by the time I was 17. My grandmother gave it to me on an ordinary afternoon without ceremony. She said, "So you do not have to wait on the porch." I still have it. The same key, on the same plain ring. I stayed in that house more times than I could count. Summers as a child, weeks in between, nights when I was older and needed somewhere quiet to think. My grandparents were always there, or I always came when they were. My mother visited twice a year, Thanksgiving and Christmas, reliably. My sister less than that. I do not say this as a judgment. People have their own lives, their own distances. But I say it because it is the context for everything that came after. What changes is what you do when someone needs you, not as a guest at a table, but as a person willing to show up when it is inconvenient. My grandfather had a series of small strokes in the last 2 years of his life. Each one took something. I drove 5 hours the first time it happened. I did not ask whether I should go. I went. My mother flew in for the hospital stay and left 4 days later. My sister sent flowers. My grandfather died on a Tuesday morning in October. I was in the room. I held his hand. My grandmother held the other one. My mother arrived that evening. After my grandfather passed, I came more often. My grandmother would not have asked. She was not the kind of woman who asked for things directly. But I could read the shape of the house when I arrived, whether it had been quiet too long, whether the kitchen had been used, whether she had been sleeping. I came when I could feel from the phone calls that she needed me there. She had a lung condition that required managing, appointments, medications, the particular bureaucracy of being unwell in a system that does not make it easy. I went with her. My mother sent cards. My grandmother was not naive about her daughter. She loved her. But she understood her too. One afternoon, this was about a year before she passed, she asked me to sit down at the kitchen table. She had something to tell me. She said she had spoken to an attorney. She said the house was going to be mine. Not in a will, which could be contested, but in a trust she had already established. She said she had made it very difficult to undo, and that she wanted me to know now, while she could tell me herself. She said, "I know what will happen when I am not here." I did not say much. I found my own attorney the following week. I had the trust documents reviewed. Everything was as she had described. It was thorough. I should not have been surprised. She had always been thorough. My grandmother passed in the February of the following year. I was with her. Her attorney contacted us within the week. The estate was straightforward. My grandparents' savings were divided between the three of us, my mother, my sister, and me. Each of us received a meaningful sum. The house was not part of that distribution. The house had already been placed in trust. It was mine. My mother did not take the news quietly. She said it was not fair. She said the house should have gone to her. It was her parents' house. She was the rightful heir. I did not say anything. She said my grandmother had not been in her right mind. That I answered. I said the trust had been drawn up when my grandmother was fully competent, witnessed, notarized, and that her physician had been consulted as part of the process. My grandmother had been thorough. I had mentioned that. The calls continued for 3 weeks, first from my mother, then from my sister, then from a number I did not recognize. I stopped answering. I forwarded everything to my attorney. They came on a Wednesday morning in March. I had known something was coming. Not this specifically, but I had known they would not simply accept what the trust said. My grandmother had known it too. That is, I think, why she had been so thorough. The documents they brought were professionally prepared. They showed a sale, a transaction in which my grandparents had allegedly sold the house to my mother and sister 2 years before my grandmother passed. Signed, notarized, or something designed to resemble a notarization. A transfer of deed. My mother said, "We own this house. We have owned it for 2 years." I looked at the paperwork for a long time. I said, "I see. These are interesting." My sister said, "We thought you would want to see them yourself before we involved anyone else." She meant it as a threat. I heard it as a courtesy. I made them both a cup of coffee. Then I called my attorney. My attorney had seen the documents by end of day. She called me that evening. She said, "These are fraudulent." She listed the specific inconsistencies. The notarization was not from a licensed notary in the state. The deed transfer used language that predated the form currently required by 2 revisions. The signatures did not match those on the documents my grandmother had filed when establishing the trust. My grandmother had kept records of everything. Her attorney had kept records of everything. My attorney had copies of everything. A cease and desist was filed within the week, then a formal fraud referral. My mother and sister retained their own attorney. Their attorney reviewed the trust documents and advised them their position was not viable. They did not proceed further. The process took 4 months. At no point was the house at risk. My grandmother had made sure of that. I moved in on a Saturday in July. The house was exactly as she had left it. The photographs still on the walls, the kitchen still the kitchen, the same counters, the same radio on the shelf, the same drawer full of birthday cards going back 40 years. I did not change anything that first day. I just walked through it. The quilt was still on the spare bed, folded at the foot of it, exactly as she had left it. The fabric pieces I had helped her choose, I could still name most of them. The blue cotton from the remnant bin, the yellow from a dress she had worn in a photograph I knew well, the green that had been a tablecloth first. I sat on the edge of the bed for a while. I did not move the quilt. I hung my jacket on the hook by the kitchen door, where my grandmother's used to hang. Blue, still my favorite color, still the shade she had asked me twice about. I looked at it there for a long time. I bake on Sunday mornings now. Windows open, radio on the same station. I measure once and trust myself the second time. That is hers. All of it, the house, the kitchen, the quilt, the key. All of it is hers, given to me on purpose, with both hands. I try to be worthy of that. I think that is enough to be going on with. My grandmother made the quilt from things she already had. Scraps, old pieces, things that looked past their use. She said, "You do not throw something away just because it looks finished. If this kind of story is what you came here for, the ones people do not usually say out loud, subscribe. There is a new one every week."